Hi, I'm Stefanie Wilder-Taylor, and I'm the only one in the room who isn't drunkish anymore. I felt like I still, from the outside, hadn't lost anything. And you wouldn't know. I felt like people wouldn't be like, oh, Stefanie really needs to quit drinking. This is so sad. I felt like people didn't know. It was all internal.
Yes.
You know? Yes. It was an internal struggle. Internally, I was unhappy and really starting to question my drinking all the time. And then, you know, but so I wanted to write the book for people that felt like, that were like, nobody's intervening. Like, it's just a question you're asking yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Laura Cathcart-Robbins, and this is The Only One in the Room. But I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, or not, since we're in a new studio and there are two other people with us, but my boyfriend, producer, and co-host Scott Slaughter is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, honey. So I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that this is the first episode that we've recorded in this space.
Right. It is the first episode. Second, but first
in
interview
our new house
that we've had. Yeah. And it's great that we have a guest from the original first season.
The first season.
Yeah.
She was one of our first guests.
She
We're going to keep people in suspense. We're not going to say who it is. She's like behind the curtain right now. You can't see
she's
her.
just been a great friend of us and the podcast and everything you do.
That's right.
For as long as we've known her. So
yes,
it's really really nice to have her back in this studio.
So should I say who it is?
Sure.
All right.
Fire away.
I'm going to read from her bio from the back of her new book.
Very cool.
Drunkish is the name of the new book. That's a spoiler. So if you're looking it up, you can look up Drunkish and see who wrote that. But her name is Stefanie Wilder-Taylor. She is an author, TV personality, and co-host of the popular podcast For Crying Out Loud. She also co-created and hosted the late-night comedy parenting show Parental Discretion with Stefanie Wilder-Taylor for Nick Mom on Nickelodeon. She's the author of Sippy Cups Are Not for Chardonnay, Nap Time is the New Happy Hour, It's Not Me, It's You, I'm Kind of a Big Deal, Gummy Bears Should Not Be Organic. I love that one. She's appeared on Oprah, Good Morning America, 2020, The Dr. Oz Show, Dr. Phil, Larry King Live. I'm sorry. I was thinking about Larry King.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
keep going. I'm enjoying this.
And the Today Show on NBC. She lives in LA with her husband and 3 delightful teenagers and dog Penelope still.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yes.
Penelope.
So welcome, Stefanie, to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's nice the only thing about having an old dog is, you put him in your bio and you're like, I hope that's not going to be just a sad reminder.
Well, and she's the only name in there for your family. It's like husband and children, but Penelope.
She gets her own. She gets her top own billing.
She does get top billing.
Does she have a nickname or are you like Penelope every time?
No, we call her Peepo.
Peepo.
Peepo. All right.
Peepo.
Power to the Peepo.
She came that way. It was one of those things where we were like, we had very big ideas about changing the name, and like Babalu was going to be her name. I know that sounds crazy, but the restaurant Babalu in Santa Monica, my husband and I had like one of our early. Anyway, it was a whole thing, and in the end, we were like, this poor dog's been through enough. Like, let her keep her name.
That's right. That's right.
We have friends who've changed their dog's name 3 times.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
They're more than friends. They're my son and his girlfriend.
Well, I didn't know if you wanted to go.
But, it's hopefully this one sticks.
You just shake your head every time like, oh, poor dog.
All right. So you and I are going to talk a bunch. But before we get into our delightful conversation, and I told you about this, but I wanted to ask you about a time that you felt like the only one in the room, or maybe you even were the only one in the room, either pre-getting sober or post-sobriety.
Okay.
So just like a short story, 2-3 minutes. You have one?
Yeah. Well, I was remembering that my first year being sober. So I got sober May 22nd, 2009. Mm-hmm. So I went through a lot of firsts that first year, which I get into in the book. But like one of the last things was that New Year's Eve was going to be one of the first times I could remember not drinking on New Year's Eve. Besides like a couple of times where, I mean, maybe once where I was really, really ill.
Right.
It's so sad. Because I'd never been pregnant over New Year's. So there was never any time that I had to be sober on New Year's Eve. So this was going to be the first time. And I was hella bitter. And I found myself I went to a wedding at a beautiful hotel in Hollywood. And the whole time I was just like, I don't know what this is going to be like. This might be hard, but I'll make the best of it. And at least I have something to do. And I was with my brother and my husband and my sister-in-law. And we get to the thing, and it was worse than I thought because it was New Year's Eve. People were already swilling champagne. And I started feeling really sorry for myself. And there had been other times and other situations in that first year where I felt like I was the only one not drinking, but then I looked around and I was like, oh, there's plenty of people not drinking, you know? This was the first time that I was like, wow, all these people really are drinking.
It's a drinking holiday.
It's such a drinking holiday, right? And my sister-in-law wasn't drinking. I think it's interesting for my perspective at the time that my sister-in-law was pregnant. Very excited, first baby. Also never cared that much about drinking anyway. So it was like not a big deal to her. Yeah. And it was a big deal to people. I hate those people. Yes. So then I was resentful of her because I'm like, well, she's not drinking, but she's not good company because she doesn't get it. Right. You know, she doesn't understand.
We're not powering through this. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. She was like, yeah, I mean, I'm pregnant. So like, sipping my iced tea or whatever. Right. And I was like, who are you?
Exactly.
And I remember having this moment of just feeling like, wow, the world is going on without me. And I don't really know these people. You know, my husband's talking to friends of his. Everybody's having a great time. And I remember feeling this feeling of almost being underwater. Like, the sounds all felt kind of far away. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Where I was like, all this life is happening and I'm miserable and I can't drink and my life sucks. And all I can do is eat these appetizers. So I ate a lot of appetizers. And then I had this epiphany, like well into the evening. I was like, well, is this going to be my attitude? Like, because life is going to be hard if this is my attitude. And all of a sudden I had this realization that I've chosen not to drink. Like nobody's forcing me. Like if I wanted to drink right now, I could. Right. And it reminded me of why I'm not drinking and what can happen when I drink. And it was helpful because although I still didn't feel connected to people, I felt like, okay, this is what it is. It's one bad night. It's one hard night and I'm going to get through it. And I'm not going to drink because that's going to affect the rest of my life and not just this one night. It's not going to make it better.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I had this moment where I was like, if I drink, everybody's still going to be boring to me. It's still going to be small talk. I still don't know any of these people. I'm not going to make some lifelong friends because I got buzzed and had a better time. And so I didn't drink, got through it, woke up the next day, and I was so relieved.
I love that story. And I also love that you had the epiphany there instead of later on or, you know, sometimes years later. Right. We have that shift in I have a choice here. Right. You know, and the choice is just attitude or approach. Right. I can treat it like this and be a victim and poor me, or I can be in acceptance and, you know, it wouldn't be any better even if I drank.
Right,
Sorry.
Right.
I just kicked
my Puma socks.
No, you're not Puma socks. What are the socks?
Bombas. My Bombas socks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And especially since we just passed New Year's Eve.
Right.
And I'm sure a lot of people, you know, it's dry January. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are looking at their relationship with alcohol right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is why it's a perfect time for Drunkish to be out, right?
That's how
I'm
they
sure
planned
somebody
it.
thought about that, right?
That was their marketing strategy for sure.
I love that. All right, I'm going to go back to my notes now. I do also, just not in my notes, want to say that Scott mentioned earlier that you were a guest in our first season. Mm-hmm. Out of all the guests we've had, I've never had so many people call me and DM me and message me, and it starts off with a compliment for me, like, oh, I really love your podcast or your book, or I love that article you read. I saw that Stefanie Wilder-Taylor was a guest on your podcast. Can you please hook me up? And I'm like, what? It's all
funny.
like cloaked in this, like it's you. They're excited about you. If you haven't listened to Stefanie's first episode with us, please do so. It is in season 1, so you got to go back, digging through the crates. And no one knows what that means. But it used to, do you know what that means?
No.
It used to be like what DJs would do.
Oh, yeah.
When they wanted to find like an old song. So you go through like the crate of albums.
Yeah.
But anyway, you dig through the crates for the podcast and go back to season 1 and find her episode. It's fantastic. We talk about some of the same stuff we're going to talk about today, but it's much different.
Perspective.
Yes, with perspective. I've only known you sober, which I was thinking about when I read your book.
Yeah.
I learned so much about you in the book.
Oh, interesting. And I learned a lot about you from your book.
That's
things
right.
That I
That's
didn't
right.
know.
Yeah. You were my first writing teacher. Speaking of my book, I'm just listing these things out. You've been incredibly supportive of my career. When I was a student of yours, just learning the basics, you were always kind of putting me out there. You saw bigger things for me.
You're super talented.
Thank you.
Super talented.
Thank you. We have collaborated together, teaching together, which I love. I actually want to do more of that. When you do read Drunkish, the people that are listening to this, look first at the acknowledgments because you'll find me.
Yes, you will.
They're short. They're short acknowledgments, which means I made the cut, which I thought, that's really cool.
Or I just don't have a lot of friends.
No, that's not true.
I was like, I think I'm good.
I also got to read Drunkish early, which was really exciting. I also want to thank you for referring Kaylin, who is our new producer.
Yay.
And this is his first official episode producing, so shout out to him.
He's produced my podcast for Crying Out Loud for over 10 years, I believe. Yeah, he's fantastic.
So that in case you're wondering about Scott, he's still here. He's our executive producer now. He's actually here in the studio executive producing as we speak.
Oh, I can feel it.
Can't you? Yeah.
I feel so executive produced right now.
Exactly. So this is brand new for us. It's still the old thing, but it's brand new. But I just wanted to say those things about you so that people understand how fortunate I am to have you in the studio today. And getting to talk about your book, which I loved, and I'm just going to read my blurb, if that's okay.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's a great blurb.
So this is my blurb. A blurb is like the little reviews from authors or other people on the back of the book when you pick it up to see if you want to read it or not. It's also on Amazon and anywhere you look to buy a book online. I wrote, I expected Stefanie's account of her love affair with drinking and subsequent sobriety to be laugh out loud hilarious and eye-opening. I didn't expect it to also be incredibly poignant and intimate. Drunkish blew me away. You'll want to turn to the person next to you and read passages aloud. I did. It's clever, vulnerable, and real as only Stefanie Wilder-Taylor can be.
Oh, that was so sweet of you.
It's true. And I did read it out loud to Scott. When he talks to you later, I'm sure he'll mention some of what I read to him. And he also got, like I make noises when I'm reading, like, oh, I didn't know that. Like I make those noises out loud. So sometimes, depending on what he's doing, he'll look at me and say, okay, what's up? What are you reading? And sometimes he just keeps doing whatever he's doing and lets it go. But I wanted to talk first about your first beer.
Okay.
I loved this chapter. You wrote, I began to feel buzzy, warm, and settled. It was as if my internal alarm systems, which had been overactive as far back as I could remember, somehow lowered their defenses just a bit. And then I wrote, like if I were annotating this, I wrote, relief, like just a little bit of relief. So tell me about that. Tell me how old you were.
Yeah. I was 14 and relief from something that I didn't know was a problem. When you're a kid and you're racked with like anxiety, free floating anxiety and fears. And, you know, the type of childhood I had was full of chaos in, you know, looking back. And, you know, I just felt that like hypervigilance all the time of like, I can't ever feel like I can relax. And I'm always worried about something. And in this instance, I was on a date. It was like my first date ever, I think. I'd had this massive crush on this guy whose real name is Scott. I forgot what I called him in the book.
I don't remember his name in the book either, but go ahead. Yeah.
He told me I could use his real name in the book, but by that point I had already named him something else. So I called him Brett in the book.
Oh,
it
that's
was
right.
the Brett.
Yeah.
So it was my best friend and I scored this double date with two guys that we liked. And they both had the same name, which was Scott. And anyway, I'd never kissed anyone. I'd never been on a date. This guy was older. I think he was a senior and I was a freshman in high school. So I was just so anxious and felt so out of my element, so self-conscious. And, you know, they brought like a 6-pack of beer and I had my first beer. And I just remember that magical feeling of like, oh my God, I feel like a little bit better. Yeah. I feel braver. I felt brave. I felt like, oh my gosh, maybe everything isn't so hard. You know, maybe I could, because I knew he was going to try to kiss me. So by the time I was like 3 beers in, I was still nervous, but I was able to tell him, you know, because I was kind of avoiding him. He kept trying to put his arm around me and like a normal person. And I was like, didn't know what to do. And I finally said, you're probably wondering like why I'm doing this. And I was like, I've never kissed anyone before. But I don't think I ever would have had the guts to say that had I not had a couple of beers.
Right. Well, so they brought a 6-pack and you had 3 of the beers?
Maybe I had 2. Maybe they had 2. I don't remember, but
still,
I know I had a couple. I know I had
couple.
at least a couple of beers. More than one, for sure.
And so, but that's kind of what it is with alcohol, right? It like, and for people who have never, I love that way you put that. Like you didn't even know that you needed relief.
Right.
Because this hypervigilant thing, it just feels like a state of normalcy, right?
Well, and I'd been getting that relief from food prior to that. So I was definitely in early stages of an eating disorder, which I didn't even know because I didn't develop an actual eating disorder until later in high school. But before that, I remember getting slightly the same feeling from eating a sleeve of Ritz crackers and hard salami in my basement watching TV. You know, It's like that same thing where you go, I don't know what it is about doing this, but it feels good and it gives me relief. Right. And that feeling of like needing to eat more ice cream, you know, and not being able to stop myself from that was a sense of relief. But then alcohol was like next level, right? Because that's a drug. So like food does something. It takes the edge off and it helps and you feel a little bit better. But I was like, oh, I can get this feeling, but times 10 from a couple of beers.
Yes.
Oh, I was off to the races.
And you were. Not in a way that some people are at that age.
Correct.
But it became part of like kind of what you did recreationally.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, as is going to follow through my whole drinking career, I had a lot of excuses. Because I was living in Spokane, Washington, in a very blue collar town. Most people most kids my age were drinking. At least that's what it seemed like to me. That was what you did. There was nothing else really to do. I wasn't in any clubs. I wasn't a Girl Scout. You know, I was going drinking on the weekends. And that's how you socialized. And that's what all your friends did. So I didn't realize that I was probably getting drunker than everybody. And I was constantly hungover. And I was, you know, not remembering stuff. The second time I drank, I had a blackout. Like I didn't remember most of it the next day, you know, like flashes. But I thought that was normal. Right. Because I was like... As I say in the book, I was like, well, I don't know. It's a chemical and like it's probably just science. Like, you know, it erases your memory. Like I didn't know until way later into sobriety that like that's not normal.
Isn't that funny?
And even when people said it's not normal, I was like, they're just saying
you don't
that.
know. Yeah. Well, because you hear so many people talking about how funny it is when someone can't remember the night before,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Do you remember when you were blah, 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 blah? And
Right.
then we got in the car that wasn't ours. And like, man, I don't remember any of that. But that's what, it's funny. It is normalized
Right.
in that setting.
But I would lose the entire night. I would have full blackouts where I did not remember. And, later in life, like in my 20s, that was really scary. I mean, I remember one time going out for the night, went to some bars in Westwood. I know what I intended to do. Next thing I know, I was waking up in the morning in my apartment and I had no memory.
Wow.
And I was like, what if my car, so from my bedroom window, I could see out into the parking lot, and I had a tandem parking spot with my roommate. I knew my roommate was home. I look out and I was like, I need to look out the window and see if my car's there.
Yeah.
But if my car is not there, I have no idea.
You have no idea.
I don't know where I
is.
went.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, and
How
I just
scary.
remember thinking I would have to call the people I was with. I'd have to fully retrace my steps, and I was petrified to look. And I looked out the window, and my car was there, and I was flooded with relief. You would think that I would be like, oh my God, I was driving my car hammered out of my mind. That wasn't the thought I had. I was just very happy to see my car. Hi, car.
What do you think? Because I think about this all the time. I got sober the year before you did in 2008. And I'm so happy that it was pre-social media, because my antics probably would have been posted by somebody.
Interesting.
But you might have been able to retrace your steps that way if it were posted.
True.
But do you think it would have been the same post-social media for you?
Yeah, I don't know, because I think I had such a way, like one of the reasons I wanted to write this book is I never thought through all of my drinking until later, until close to the time I got sober, I didn't really think I had a problem. Like I just wasn't somebody, I just could always look at somebody else's drinking and go, well, they drink like that too. And I just really like alcohol and I really like the way it makes me feel. And why am I going to be so hard on myself? And even when stuff would happen, and later, I did humiliate myself and I did feel, but when you humiliate yourself in your 20s, for me, there was just a way I had of justifying it or rationalizing it or, just going like, okay, that happened, but I just got extra drunk because I was not used to drinking hard liquor, or I was drinking on an empty stomach.
Yeah, I didn't have anything to eat that day.
I mixed it with some medication by accident. I just won't do that again. And it's like every time that happened, I was like, well, I'm not going to do that again.
Right.
And then I would do it again. But it wasn't until way late. So there's ways you can call that being functional. You can call that having a high bottom. We call that. Now I don't think that's really a thing. I mean, it is, but it's a way of, like, alcohol wasn't serving me. But I think if social media, to answer your question, I feel like I would have been able to been able to just go like, oh, everybody was having fun. Look at all the pictures.
You might have been able to really normalize it.
Yeah.
Like, we all look drunk. We're all having a good time.
Right.
And it's fine. It's fine because you woke up the next morning and it was fine.
Right.
Right.
But isn't it funny that, like, and I don't know if this is just being an adult, but I was at a New Year's party and nobody was drunk, right? It was like, and everybody was drinking. And everybody was like, people were doing some shots. People were doing like Jell-O shots. And my husband had a couple of Jell-O shots and a beer. He did not get drunk. Like, I feel like now, I used to think everybody was drunk, and now I realize, like, oh, the people that are really drunk places are usually alcoholics. Like, because there's somebody I know, there's somebody in, like, my very wider circle that, like, is the person that gets really drunk.
Right. They cross that line.
Always.
Yeah.
Right. And then everybody gets nervous about them, like, oh, what's that person going to, that person wasn't at this gathering that I was at. Yeah. But, and I thought, yeah, like regular people don't I crossed that line a lot when I was, but you know what I'm saying? But
I do.
Could justify it.
I do. And I think, and there are a lot of people who get sober in their 20s. But I think when you're younger like that, it's easier to justify. So,
especially if you have a problem and want to justify it.
Right, right. I always call them like my 3 horsemen: rationalization, justification, and minimization.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I can minimize that.
Mm-hmm.
I can certainly justify that.
Right.
And I could rationalize that. Like, that could make sense if.
Yes.
And there was one of those, whatever it was, you know,
Right.
just like bringing anything in. We're going to talk about the 20 questions. You kind of answered my next question, which was drinking fun for you? And it was, right?
Drinking was so fun and
Yeah.
so necessary for me at certain parts of my life. You know,
Yeah.
necessary did stand-up comedy for a long time, and I just thought everybody was terrified of going on stage. I mean, some people like doing stand-up. I couldn't even imagine. I was like, who would like it? I felt like I did stand-up because I had to, because it was what I thought I wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
But I was so scared every time, so I always had to like drink at least a little bit, and times I drank too much.
Well, I mean, Scott and I know a lot of sober comics now.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that, I would assume that everybody was either really high or drunk enough, not really drunk,
Right.
but like comfortably buzzed,
Right.
so they could go on stage and face an audience. And because it's brutal when people don't laugh, man.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes. That was terrifying to me, that rejection.
Yeah.
But
you're
so
funny.
I have a chapter about I drink because I'm a comic.
Yes.
That's a chapter in the book.
Yes.
And I had to narrow it down because I had too many stories of times that I accidentally got too drunk, you know? And I was like, okay, like one is going to be enough. Like, because I told a story about drinking before I did a TV show.
Yes.
And it got to the point that it wasn't even the idea of having it. It was the idea of what it represented. Like, it felt like medicine, you know? So I stole a beer from the mini bar in the hotel where I was and smuggled it into my dressing room so that I could pound one warm beer, because I was in a dressing room all
Gross.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like 10 minutes, I had it all. Your brain has so much work to do when
Yeah.
you're an addict, right?
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to go on stage at this time, but I want to feel the effects of the beer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to drink it like 10 minutes before, all that timing. And
Oh.
like, do you really think one beer helped me? No, but it was the idea
Yes.
of like having that medicine before I performed.
And do you think like the average person even thinks that way with all the strategy and the scheduling and all of that? I don't.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
No, other people get it.
Yes.
And when we get help for our drinking,
Mm-hmm.
even if we go in kicking and screaming, like that's where the relief comes in all the people that are like, oh yeah, I did that too.
Right, right. Oh, that's all you did?
Yeah.
You know, I had a chart, on the wall next to my bed. Right.
Right, right.
I love that. Not without my Xanax. So I talked to Stefanie about this before we started the interview. I am going to spoil a couple of things. I don't think it's going to make you not buy the book at all. I think it's going to make you want to read it more. We're not going to get, expose
it's
every
fine.
little thing.
Yeah.
But I felt like Not Without My Xanax was written for me. Like you were like, okay, Laura, here's your chapter. I'm going to write this chapter for you. Because I totally identified with the terror of stopping, the fetal position that you were in. And the quote that I loved was, I wasn't a complete stranger to misrepresenting myself to doctors.
Yeah.
This is why Scott says he fell in love with me, and that's a whole nother story. But if you read Stash or listen to it, you'll see why.
Which please do. It's
Yes.
so good.
So yeah, I wrote sister with exclamation points here.
I was thinking kindred spirit when I
Yes,
read your
yes.
description of
Totally.
being in the pharmacy.
Can you just talk to me a little bit about that? Because Xanax was not the thing that I felt like. Xanax wasn't the thing, but it was kind of like a constant in there, right? Like it was something that.
Well, so Xanax gave me the feeling of like that first beer that I ever
Right,
had, where
right.
it wasn't like I didn't really get high from Xanax, but what I felt was I remember the first time I took Xanax. So I'd taken Klonopin before,
Yes.
which same family,
Yeah.
benzos, But I had this friend who subsequently got sober, but who I never really felt like was that bad.
Yeah.
these people. And she would take a quarter of a Klonopin. And I remember feeling a lot of anxiety, and she offered me a quarter Klonopin. And I remember taking it and going, well, this is nice, but like, I mean, I would need a lot more than this. And
Yes.
eventually, after I had postpartum anxiety, and eventually I had my own prescription for a benzo, and I think it was Klonopin or one of them, Ativan, something, and I ran out of that one. And my husband, who is not an addict, had somehow, for some reason, had a prescription for Xanax, and I don't remember why, honestly, but he hadn't taken it. Because he's one of those people. He's totally normal. And he was like, it makes me tired.
Right.
So I remembered that he had it. And I wasn't even being sneaky, but I was out of what I had. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just take a Xanax instead. Same thing. So I took like a full milligram of Xanax because I was taking Anyway, the point is, I remember taking it and going like, oh my God, this is the greatest feeling ever. I'm not high. I feel normal.
Yes.
I feel like this is what the world feels like without anxiety. Like, who are these people that get to just take Xanax
Yes.
And I was like, this is a miracle drug. I wanted to like share the good news. I wanted to like run outside and tell everybody, like, if you're feeling like I was feeling, take a Xanax.
Right.
And the worst news ever for me was like, that was going to have to go away. Like,
Right.
that was just such bad news.
Because stopping drinking is one thing, but stopping it without anything.
Right.
Like Xanax, it would be a great way to ease off drinking.
Right?
Yes.
And for somebody who's not an addict, in fact, I told my husband because he was, okay. So my husband takes antidepressants, and he had to get off of one antidepressant and get onto another one. And it is hard to get off an antidepressant.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever done it, but I have. It's really terrible withdrawal. And I was like, you're so lucky because you could take like a half a Xanax and it will help you and you're not going to get addicted. With me, I was addicted to Xanax like immediately.
Yes.
Because I was like, oh, my
Yeah.
body needs this.
Right.
This is made for me.
And then so, I always think about, I talk about this sometimes, that alcohol is the cure for alcoholism. Right?
Right.
And so, and it just is like what the ism is what you described, right? That
Right.
anxiety, the self-consciousness, the hypervigilance, it manifests differently in different people, but whatever
Right.
that ism looks like,
Right.
alcohol helps. But the problem with alcohol for alcoholics is that we overshoot the mark. We need more and more and more. We build a tolerance. We have bodies that may not be able to process it well, but brains that then think they can't live without it.
Right.
And so then that's that cycle of addiction. And this is why I can't safely take a Xanax. I could probably if it was administered to me for a medical purpose and
Right.
it was a finite period of time and some, like Scott would hold them for me
Right.
and administer them.
Oh, don't give them to him.
He could have them. He could have them for as long as he wears a nurse's uniform.
Yeah. Scrubs. Get him some scrubs.
That's cute, right?
Yeah.
But that's, and I think that people who've never had an issue just don't really understand that you couldn't just continue to take Xanax to get off of booze.
Well, when I quit drinking, I had to taper off the Xanax.
Yes.
So I was titrating off of it. I went to my psychiatrist who was prescribing me my antidepressants and my Xanax. And that is a whole long story, which I'm sure you understood in the book. I had accidentally employed a addiction specialist, not meaning to. And then when I had to go back and say, I need to get off of this now, I was so embarrassed because I had to tell him like, hey, I stopped drinking.
Yes.
And he was like, what? I wasn't aware that you had a drinking problem. Then I was like, me neither. But I was. He was like, you never mentioned that. So when I went to get off of the Xanax, that was a harder withdrawal. I didn't have any withdrawal to getting off of alcohol. Like I quit drinking. It sucked.
Right.
But I mentally had a dependence on drinking, emotionally, but physically I had a dependence on Xanax.
Yeah.
And so getting off of that I was fine at the beginning. I tapered off and then I was fine. And then all of a sudden it hit me really bad. And I just felt like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Like, I feel too anxious. I don't know how people live like this. Like, this is too much and it's really hard. And I called the person who was helping me, my elder, the program. Whatever, you know what I mean? I called for counseling and she told me, yeah, I said, listen, I think I have to take a Xanax. You know, I medically speaking, I was prescribed Xanax. Like I have a generalized anxiety disorder. Like I'm different. Like, I don't know what's going on with you, but for me, I really need Xanax. And she was like, no, that's up to you. Like, I'm not your boss. Like, that's between you and your doctor. I suggest that you make an appointment with your psychiatrist. And if your psychiatrist tells you that you need to be taking Xanax, then that's up to you. And I was like, this bitch doesn't get it at all. Like, I don't need Xanax like next week.
Yeah.
I need it yesterday.
Yes.
I got to get Xanax in my system like right now.
Right.
And it was just terrible to hear that. And I was like, I really thought she would sign off on this. You know what I mean? I thought like she hears it in my voice. She can hear I'm very upset right now and I'm very anxious. And she was like so neutral about it. But I got really upset and I was like, well, then I don't think I can do it. And she said to me, very wise words. She was like, well, the thing is, like, you want to take a Xanax because it works. Like, that's why you drink, because it works. Of course it does. And it works for everybody. That's like why it's invented. But for you, you will take it and your body will recognize that, oh, this is the shortcut that I need to feel better. And then tomorrow, when you're anxious again, you will need that shortcut again because you will not have developed any of the muscles to like self-soothe, right?
Wow. Yes.
It's like teaching a baby to go to sleep. Like you have to, these are things you're going to have to learn and there's no easy way. And I was like, well, how am I going to do it? And she said to me, like, this is it. You're doing it. Like, you're going to get through moment by moment and you just have to trust me that eventually you won't feel this way and you won't need it.
I love that. And
it was so hard. And that first day of that, of feeling all those feelings, which I thought were not, like, you hear about people going, oh, you're going to have to feel your feelings and it's really hard. And I was like, whatever. I don't, nothing bad was happening to me. That was the first time that I was like, oh, I have to feel physically so uncomfortable in my body and I crawling out of my skin and I'm going to have to feel that. And I never liked to feel that way. So I always medicated it.
I am going to commit your elder's words to memory.
So stupid.
No, but I love that. And I also think it's really important to point out that you don't have to be an addict to have a dependence on something like Xanax.
Right.
A lot of people that take it for a long time who don't have addiction have a hard time getting off of it. But I just love the idea that it's the shortcut that your brain will remember.
Right.
To feeling better.
Especially if you're an addict, right?
Especially if you're an addict.
So like my husband could need something like, say, Xanax and use it properly as prescribed
yes.
and then go, I don't want to use this anymore and then feel not. But for me, my brain, it imprints and I go, oh, okay, this is what I need. This is the recipe.
Yeah, it's like someone that's not an addict can take it need-based.
Right.
This is a time where it's required, but this isn't a time where it's required.
Right.
And like you said, our brains go, oh, feel better. We always need this.
Oh, and then I will treat the symptoms before I'm having symptoms.
Oh, for sure.
Right? I'm like, well, I don't want to have anxiety tomorrow, so I better take a Xanax now.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because I thank you for writing that chapter. I loved it. I loved your whole book, but I really felt like you could have retitled it.
Well, I think I wrote in there that I took a pain pill when I was young.
Yeah.
I mean, young, and loved the feeling.
Yes.
And I don't know that I knew that I liked that feeling more than like maybe other people. I mean, we all like that feeling. right?
We do. I do.
But sometimes people are like, "Oh, I can't take Vicodin because it like makes me nauseous or whatever," and I'm like, work through it.
Yes.
Like
you're not working hard enough. Scott didn't like pain pills, which I just didn't understand. But I'm glad you brought them up because that kind of leads me into the final section of our interview. And when we get to the end, if there's anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't, we'll talk about that. But so let's see, how did I want to start this? Lisa Belkin.
Oh, okay. We're going there.
Yeah. So she's a journalist.
Do you know her?
I don't know her. I only know her from you.
Okay.
But so she's a journalist.
Okay, yeah.
And you can talk about how you guys met because that's in the book too. But like the kind of connection that you two had. Mm-hmm. But she wrote this. She was writing an article about you. Mm-hmm. And you had, well, I'm just going to read what she wrote, and then we can talk about that.
Okay.
She says, but in late May, 6 weeks before the publication of her latest book, a memoir in which alcoholism merry companion, Miss Wilder-Taylor put up a post on her blog, Baby on Board, that has reverberated throughout mommy blogdom. I drink too much, she wrote. I quit on Friday. She later wrote, it's embarrassing to be all rah, 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 go booze, only to zip off with my tail between my legs saying, never mind, I've joined the other team, but it's what I had to do. Becoming a mother, about which she writes with passionate love, inflamed her insecurities. I wanted to be the best mom I could, she said, but I felt like I was failing every day. During one hospital scare with her daughter, she mused, this would be a really good place for a bar, right here in the ER, which I laughed out loud at when I first read it. And so she, what does she say at the end? I wrote that. That's not her. I also, see, what I have here are a lot of the comments on this article.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I clipped a lot of those comments, but basically, she was outing you.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to talk about. Because at the end of this blog post, you talk about how you're basically breaking up with booze. Mm-hmm. But then at the very last line is like, now Vicodin, on the other hand.
So that was...
Yeah.
Okay.
So...
You're conflating just a couple of things.
Oh, I am. Tell me.
So, which is fine. But basically, I wrote this blog post. I had quit drinking a couple of days before.
Right.
Okay. So, but I had, my blog went out to like hardly any readers. I mean, really in the hundreds, not like the thousands, right? I had a few hundred blog readers that were following along. This was after I had already published Sippy Cups. And when I quit drinking, I felt it was very dramatic in my mind. It was like, I'm done. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'd tried to quit before. I'd even like tried to get help before, and then I'd always gone back to it. And this time I was like, that's it, I'm done. Mm-hmm. So the next time I went to write a blog post, I was like, well, I feel like I would be lying because a lot of my jokes and humor and stuff had been a lot about drinking. And so I told my blog readers what Lisa Belkin reprinted for her readers. But Lisa Belkin had a parenting column in the New York Times.
Right.
I had a few hundred people reading. She had millions of people reading. So without telling me anything, I didn't know, like 10 days after I'd quit drinking, she puts up a column and dedicates it to me. Yeah. And I didn't know that was happening. All of a sudden, I'm getting contacted by the media. Like I got called from Dr. Phil, and I was like, what is happening?
And you were like days sober at this point, right?
I was 10 days sober.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was shocked and embarrassed. And like, a couple of them were producers who I knew because I'd done the show before, let's say, for some other reason, not having anything to do with drinking. So I was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested in telling this story. Like, right. I'm 10 days sober. I have nothing to tell to anybody about it.
Yeah.
So, like 4 months later, the New York Times, a reporter for the New York Times wanted to do a story. And I said, and she wanted to include me. She was just like, I think it's a really interesting story that you had this blog and these books, and like I want to like tell it in a nice way, like not exploitive. And I agreed to it. And that was a really nice, that was on the front page of the style section of the New York Times.
Yes.
And that's the one where, now I was 4 months sober and, you know, a recovering stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
So I made that joke. I wasn't really taking Vicodin. I just made it, I was trying to make it was like a button on the article. Like I was being funny. And people did not think that was funny.
No.
Like they thought I was like, oh, you're quitting drinking, but now you're going to take pain pills. And I was, but you can't tell. I can't go, hey, can we issue like a retraction of the blah, you know, can we do a correction? I don't take Vicodin. I'm really.
Can I read a couple of the comments?
God. Yeah.
I won't read the whole things, but this one says, let me see if I got this right. Woman starts drinking because she's bored and stressed by having one child. Does she learn anything from observing her own behavior or even from listening to other mothers? No! ! She proceeds to have more children, thus increasing her stress and promoting more drinking. And then it goes on and on and on and on.
Oh, yeah. People are so nice online.
And then also it ends with, please do some research on what a mother's life is really like before you stop using birth control. I'm like, harsh. And then this one, and the part about Vicodin, not so funny. You need to realize joking about any kind of addictive substance isn't funny. And then it's a little shocking when this article glorifies out of control, be it alcohol or drug addiction person, a out of control person, who also happens to be a mother with 3 children. I wonder whether this literary license the author took in search of an interesting ending, but if the statement is true, the mother is seriously disturbed and needs a lot of help. This is about Vicodin.
Right.
Yes.
I can see it. I can see that. I can see why people would feel that way.
Yeah. But then Bart to the rescue. Do you know Bart?
Uh-huh.
Bart says, please lighten up and take into account that in addition to being a mother, this woman spent years as a stand-up comic. Stand-up comic, the joke, which the writer chose to put at the end of the article to finish on the humorous note, is an ironic joke. And I hardly see how outing yourself for having 3 glasses of wine a night in the privacy of your home and that fairly moderate behavior and seeing that fairly moderate behavior in yourself is a big problem in any way constitutes out of control behavior. To me, this exhibits quite a lot of self-control. And so I was like, yes, Bart. Thank you, Bart. I figured you must know Bart.
Bart is very supportive.
Yes. But I've seen this kind of vitriol in the Huffington Post when I post articles.
Right.
We talked about this before, usually about race. People will say, oh, she's half white, or like her boyfriend is white. When I write about being black, like somehow that negates. People talk about. So
you don't get to have a say.
I don't get to have a say. And I'm not half white. I'm fully black, right?
Right.
But they say all kinds, and they, you know, maybe her kid's at fetal alcohol syndrome. Maybe that's like part of it. You know, it's just like they go in on the personal.
Oh, they really do.
And Scott usually reads the comments for me, so I don't have to see these. But this is the New York Times.
Yeah.
This is why this was so shocking to me, and I had to read that. This isn't a tabloid.
This was the New York Times. People were like, CPS should come and take her kids away. I don't know if you saw that one.
I did. No, I didn't see that, but I saw it in your book, I think, somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We doing okay? Okay. There's all kinds of stuff going on around us, and we're like beeps and movement.
I just didn't know if it was still recording. I was like, is there an emergency? Because this is good. This is gold, you guys know. Yes, this was the New York Times, which was, it was humiliating, the comments.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that has kept me public about it. So now I'm outed, right?
Yes,
like it's
you've been
out.
outed.
It's out.
Yes.
Now I have some accountability because I'm like, well, now I can't be at Trader Joe's buying wine. I can't change my mind.
Right?
Like, you know, I suddenly felt sort of famous for, you know, in a really weird way. You feel so exposed.
Yes.
Right? Here's all these people with opinions about me, and I'm the one who said I drank too much. So, like, you know, I can't really go back and go, well, on second thought, a few glasses of wine a night isn't that much.
Right.
Let's not be crazy. And also at the time, the thing that why I quit drinking was over drinking and driving with the kids.
Yes.
Now, the way I told my story at the beginning, I did not include that. And the reason I didn't include that I told myself was, well, if I say that I drove drunk with the kids in the car, that nothing happened. I didn't get a DUI. I didn't crash my car. But I felt so bad. I mean, I was humiliated. It was the worst thing I'd ever felt like I'd ever done. And I thought, if I say I did that, then people are going to go, oh, well, I would never do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to look at my own drinking, which in retrospect is really dumb because, like, who am I to, like, what am I dictating how people are going to feel about themselves?
Yeah.
But honestly, I think it was to save face. I just wasn't ready, you know, to tell that part of the story. So I thought, like, hey, I'm doing enough right now. And I was outed against my will. Right. I mean, I outed myself to a few hundred people, but the New York Times thing, the first one, that outed me. So at that point, I was like, well, now I'm really not going to be like, oh, and another thing I did. Right. So time kept going on, and I felt like I'm not going to say it now, but what was happening even after the New York Times was I started getting emails from people and messages from women saying, I think I drink too much too. Yes. Like, do I drink? How do I know? Yeah. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for telling your story. And I started to weigh out, like, okay, well, so I got some really mean I mean, those comments made me cry. Don't get me wrong. And from then on, my husband would have to screen the comments for me and only read me the nice ones. You know, because, like, what's done is done. Yeah. The interview's done. It's not going to change my behavior going forward. And part of me was like, fuck off. Like, I quit drinking.
Yes.
Like, what do you want from me? Like, I am not drinking, so we can't go back in time and put me on birth control so that I never make you happy so I don't have more kids because I'm a terrible mom. I quit drinking. It wasn't until many years later that I was outed again, and I was outed about the drinking part.
Drinking and driving.
The drinking and driving part. Sorry. Yeah. The driving part. And that's a story that I told. That was Katie Couric outed me against my will. I said I didn't want to talk about that. They asked me about it anyway on the air, and I was honest about it. And that is when I got some real freedom because now it was out, right? Like, we're only as sick as our secrets. So now that part that I thought was like the worst part, that the floor would swallow me up, that I would, you know, have my kids, like, you know, but nothing happened.
Right.
Like, people were like,
yeah.
I still got the same emails from people. Oh my gosh, I feel the same way. Like, do you think I have a problem? What should I do? And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that was the worst of it. You know, that was the worst.
I've got to tell you that, you know, I've known you for 14 years.
Yeah.
And I thought I knew your story. I was like, this is one of the chapters I read out loud to Scott because I was floored by that chapter, by your honesty, the detail too that you recall, like what was in the drinks and, you know, where you were. And I think you I don't know, there's a part where you have more right at the beginning than the mom who's serving margaritas.
Martinis, apricot martinis.
Yes. But just you bring us along on that humiliation journey with you. And I felt it. And I wanted to just like applaud after I read it, just because of the bravery of it. People say that to me a lot, and it kind of lands hollow sometimes. Because I'm like, it wasn't all brave, you know? Like, I don't mind telling a lot of this stuff. So, like, the story that they're commenting on might not have taken bravery from me because I wasn't afraid to tell it. But this felt like very brave writing to me.
Well, you know, I do remember a lot of that night, and what I felt was important to tell, and I do this, you know, when I teach writing as well. I think that it's hard to be honest. Like, no, it doesn't come that easily to me, but I make myself do it and feel uncomfortable because I think that that's the only thing that really gets through to people. If you try to gloss over stuff and you don't tell the real truth about how you're feeling, then it's harder for people to identify, you know. And I what I tried to do was stay in the moment of like what was happening in my head, not like jump to later when I felt so bad about it, but like the defiance and the ego and the like selfishness that goes into like how my mindset
Yes.
was when I was drinking,
Yeah.
which was like, I want to feel good and I feel good. And why shouldn't I feel good? And I was mad at my husband. I
Yes.
deserve to feel good.
Yes.
My life is hard. Nobody gets it. I've got 3 babies. I got 2 18-month-old twins and I got a 4-year-old and I'm watching 2 of them right now. My husband's home with 1 kid. Like, what's he complaining about? Why is he trying to find me?
Yeah.
Like, get over it. Like, you're watching 1 kid. Like, my life is hard. I'm stuck at home all the time. Like, my life is so different. I have no identity. Like, I was so full of like bitterness and complaints. And I just didn't, I thought I was fine.
Yeah.
I thought I was fine.
Well,
I thought I was happy and fine and like getting my relief. And I wasn't thinking about driving home.
Yeah.
I was thinking I still feel good. And the thing was, the next day, that night when my husband cornered me and was like, you're drunk, I was still defiant. I was like, no, I'm not. And I know I was staggering. Like, he told me later that I was like staggering up the driveway. I mean, he was so mad. I've never seen him that mad before. He must have put the kids to bed because I don't remember after that. I woke up on the couch and that's like when it hit me of like, this is what always happens.
Yeah.
And now I've done something dangerous, but this is what I do.
Yeah.
This is who I am when I drink. I think I'm fine. I always think I'm fine. That's like my story.
Yeah. Well,
Like, I think I'm fine. The Stefanie Wilder-Taylor story, you know?
maybe next book. But you let us feel that too. Like, we as the readers, like we're justifying along with you sometimes.
Because I don't want to let myself off the hook. I don't want to write like, of course, later I would realize how, like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, I want to call myself, I want you to see exactly what my brain was doing.
Exactly. And you do.
Thank you.
Last question.
Yeah.
You wrote, I thought I'd never get used to my booze-free existence. Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Tell me
I
about that.
have.
Yeah.
I mean, again, New Year's Eve, I don't even think about it. I don't think about, you know what I think about more is like not being able to eat sugar. I still get like upset. That,
I know.
like,
I was going to talk about that, but that might have
we
to
don't
be
have
another
time.
interview.
Yeah. But I mean, but like alcohol, I don't know. I spent years, I think, glorifying it sometimes or having those moments where I'd really have to think through the drink. But I mean, now that I have serenity in my brain without alcohol. So I think, why would I want to do that?
Yes.
I didn't really like the taste of alcohol anyway. And I didn't really like being drunk. I liked the relief that came with like a glass or 2 of wine, but I could never keep it to that relief. I could never stay buzzed. I always had to get drunk. But like I said, I didn't like being drunk. I didn't like being hungover. So no, like I feel good without alcohol now. So when I go to a party and I see people drinking, I'm like, that's nice for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't.
What do you order at a party now to drink?
You know, I'm so boring. Like my book company like made me come up with some like mocktail ideas. I drink water or
drink
like
water.
I'll have a Coke Zero or like I drink a lot of like flavored seltzer water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no sugar, but like, you know.
Yeah, he drinks a lot of that too.
Yeah, I love those like Waterloos, the grape Waterloos.
Oh. Well, actually, we got a fizzy water machine.
Oh, yeah,
and you
yeah.
can add flavor to it.
Yeah,
So that's what he's been experimenting with.
I have one of those too, but like the gas ran out. There's 5 people in our family, so the gas ran out right away. And I was like, oh, this is going to be expensive.
Yeah, you have 5 people in your family. That's right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know, because my older daughter still lives at home.
She does.
I know, yeah.
Wait, how old is she now?
She's 19.
She's 19. Ah, you still
She's
live at home.
turned
when you're
19. Yeah.
Mine lived at home until he was 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she's going to local college.
Yeah, so did he.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my twins are 16.
Oh, they'll be around for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's expensive then.
Yeah.
I love talking to you.
I love talking to you.
Yeah,
I'm obsessed with you.
Same. We're obsessed with each other, but I really am. And I meant what I said at the beginning. I'm so grateful for you.
I'm so grateful for you.
Oh.
I mean, you've been there like the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't exactly say like what happened at the very beginning of our friendship, but it was like really great. Like you came over to me and basically like befriended me.
Yeah. Well, you were
like told me it was going to be okay.
Funny. And you were a mom, which
Yeah.
I totally identify with. Oh, really the last thing I want you to say, because, you know, titling a book, I think is a lot like naming a baby. Right? Like you come up with a few different ones and you want to like see, oh, maybe it's going here. And but you had a different title for this at first.
Oh yeah, I sure did.
Yes, and it was
High Bottom Girls.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was so good to me.
Me
Like,
too. I love that title.
I was like, this is the best title. It's catchy. It's kind of edgy. It's
I saw the logo,
attention-
like the little, like the high bottom.
Right. That's what I thought too.
Yes.
I pictured it to be like what's the traveling pants
Yes,
girls? There's like a
yes.
picture of the
Sisterhood
back
of
of
the
the
Travel-
jeans.
yes.
I was like, oh, this could be so fun and like trendy looking. And my book company was like, no.
Nobody knows what that means.
No, they
right?
didn't. They said it's not accessible. Yeah,
Right.
because you have to explain it. And I was like, but I feel like you could understand it. I'll address it as we get into the book.
Right.
And they were like, yeah, no.
No. Can you explain what high bottom is?
So high bottom is like high functioning. Like you're not a low bottom. Your bottom of your alcoholism isn't like you're homeless and, you know,
Right.
lose your job or lose
In
your marriage or
jail,
lose your
yeah.
kids or something that's really horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I still from the outside
Yes.
hadn't lost anything and you wouldn't know. I felt like people wouldn't be like, oh, Stefanie really needs to quit
Right.
drinking. This is so sad. I
Yeah.
felt like people didn't know. It was all internal.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it was an internal struggle. Internally, I was unhappy and really starting to question my drinking all the time. And then, you know, but so I wanted to write the book for people that felt like that were like, nobody's intervening. Like, it's just a question you're asking yourself.
Yeah. Well, when you told me that title, I was hooked. I was like, I love that title.
Yeah.
That's perfect. I had ideas. And then when you came back and said they didn't like it, I was really disappointed. But I love Drunkish.
I'm so
I
happy
love
now
it.
that I
Yes.
named it that.
Yes.
It was, I came up with it spur of the moment. I was like, well, what's, like, I wanted to imply that my attitude, my funny attitude, which is
Yeah.
like, I'm drunk-ish.
Yeah.
I'm not that, you
It's
know.
not a big deal.
Yes, that's cool.
Yeah, drunk, but
Ish. Like, not like alcoholic-ish. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
The
up
ish
for
makes it better.
interpretation. Yeah, it does. It does.
does.
And my editor liked that title right away. I
Right.
wasn't sold on it at all. I was
Yeah,
like,
I love it.
I really want the other one. And she was like, no, we all really like Drunkish.
Yeah.
So that's the title.
That's the
and I was
title.
like, oh, okay.
But I think people will get it.
Yeah.
I think people are getting it as we speak. And
Hopefully.
yes. So speaking of that,
Yeah.
get it. Go on, just stop the interview right now. Stop listening or keep listening and get to the other screen and go to wherever you buy books. You can go to Simon & Schuster's site, right?
Is anyone going to do that?
Yes.
Oh.
People do that.
Okay.
Because
You
if you
could go
on-
anywhere.
you can go anywhere. But if you go on Simon & Schuster's site, it also takes you everywhere. So you have
Oh,
your
okay.
choice of where you want to buy it.
Oh,
You can
okay.
go on Amazon. You can go on Barnes & Noble. What are the other ones?
Target.
Target. There's another one with book in the title that I can't remember. But anyway,
Right.
anywhere you get books, you can go on right now and order it. And
Also, I read the Audible version.
you did. That's right.
Yeah.
So yes, please listen if you can. Someone just texted me like books are their favorite thing to do. It's their treat while they're running. Like they
okay.
listen to books and then that's how they get to the next mile and the next mile.
Oh,
So
I like that.
use it as motivation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Supporting female authors.
Thank you.
Yes. Or get it from your independent bookstore
Good idea.
because they are struggling. We're going to be at one.
Yes. Zibby's
Zibby's-
bookstore.
yes.
Zibby's
Zibby-
bookshop.
Ziggy. Zibby's Bookshop. Why am I saying Ziggy? Zibby's Bookshop on Montana in Santa Monica, California.
On the 28th
On the
of
28th
January.
of January.
Yeah.
We'll be in person.
Yes, we
We'll
will
be doing our
together.
thing there.
Yes, I did it for
Yes,
you, and now
yes.
you're going to come do it for
That's
me.
right.
It's going to be fun.
So, but independent bookstores are a really great place to get books because they are dying, and big corporations, which we also love, but they are
Right.
kind of taking away the business. So support.
We're super into corporations.
We love corporations, especially
We're
what are
like
they,
really
Bombas?
capitalist.
Is it Bombas?
Bombas. We're kind of drunk right now, you guys. Forgive us.
Ish.
It's like ish.
All right.
On life.
That is it, Miss Stefanie
Thank
Wilder-Taylor.
you. Thank you for having me back.
Love you.
Love you and love your podcast. Bye.